In this chapter, we'll be talking about comprehension, which is one of the very basic skills that you have to master before you can go on to analyze and evaluate a text. First, you have to understand it. So the chapter starts with a video in the PowerPoint. I'm not going to show the video. You're welcome to open up the PowerPoint and watch this. It is a retelling of Lewis Carroll's The Jabberwocky. And Lewis Carroll uses a lot of nonsense words in his poetry, but we still understand the story because of the way that it's written. Even though we may not understand certain words, we still are able to comprehend the storyline in the poem. So I encourage you to look it up. You don't have to necessarily watch the video. You could even just look up Jabberwocky and read it. But it's a good example of how context clues can help us understand content that we may be unfamiliar with. So the questions that you should be able to answer when you finish this chapter essentially are, what can you do to increase your comprehension? What clues within the text can you use in order to identify the topic of a reading? What are surveying and predicting, and why are they useful? And what are the 4 different types of context clues that you might find within a text? There are a variety of terms that you should know by the end of this chapter. We're going to talk about a few of these. The others are in your textbook. So why is comprehension important? First of all, being a good reader is an important skill in almost any career field. Whatever profession you decide to go into, it's important that you be able to read and understand instructions or directions. You may need to read customer orders or requests. You may need to work directly with the public and present material in like a social media account or advertising or emails. You may need to do continuing education. Even if you're not required to do continuing education like medical fields, in a lot of areas you have to stay current on what's happening in your field. What are new HVAC systems and like what innovations are happening in your area. So being a better reader is an important skill for almost any career field. Of course, it's also important for you as a student because many of you probably still have several years of college ahead of you, and being a good reader will certainly help you get through those years more easily. So there are some keys to better comprehension, and we're going to talk about them in the next few slides. The first one is being able to identify the topic of a reading. We'll talk about topic and main idea as 2 separate concepts. This chapter focuses particularly on the topic. We're also going to talk about how to survey or preview a text, which is before you begin reading it, and how to make predictions and why that matters in terms of your comprehension. So the first step is being able to identify the topic. Typically a topic is a single word or a very short phrase, and it answers the question, what is this about? You can typically tell what the topic is if you are skimming through the text and surveying it or taking notes. The topic should sort of float to the surface. It should be pretty apparent. You can also look at the title, and you can look at the subtitles to help you gain a greater sense of like the topic as a whole. Keep in mind that the word or phrase should be just right. I don't know if you know the Goldilocks and the 3 Bears fairy tale, but the topic shouldn't be too broad or too narrow. It should be just right. And I sometimes describe that as being like an umbrella. You want the umbrella to be just the right size to cover the material that's in the content, that's in the text itself. So this works if you're reading a passage and you have to identify the topic, but it also works in reverse. If you're trying to write an essay and you have to come up with your topic or your main idea or your thesis, the umbrella theory works in reverse as well. You want to make sure that whatever your thesis is or whatever your topic is, you want to make sure that's what you're writing about, right? So think about it like an umbrella. In this example here, it's important to incorporate fresh fruit into a healthy diet. Apples, bananas, and strawberries are all great additions. Most fruit is full of antioxidants that are good for you. That example covers sort of a variety of things. You wouldn't want to say that it was about apples and bananas because that is too narrow. That doesn't cover all the material, right? You also wouldn't want to say it's about a healthy diet because if you think about this short passage, it doesn't really include everything that you would need if you were going to talk about a healthy diet. So you don't want something that's too big or too small. You want something that is just right. And health benefits of fruit fits that just right umbrella, right? That's exactly what this paragraph is about. So that's your first key step in being able to comprehend texts, is learning how to identify the just right topic of the passage. Once you've been able to do that, it's also important to continue through the text and survey and preview. Previewing happens before you actually get into reading the text thoroughly, so it's more like skimming, right? You're just looking at the pages to get an idea ahead of time of what this reading is about, what it contains, what you're going to be learning. So you will read the title and the subtitles, look at any pictures or charts that are included, read text features that are provided at the beginning of the chapter, like objectives or an index. Read anything that's kind of extra about the material. Look over the summary points or the end of chapter questions at the end so that you have an idea of what kinds of things you should be learning as you're reading. And always notice anything that's in bold or in italics or that's printed large, because those kinds of things are done that way on purpose to kind of get your attention. So now that you know how to survey or preview, the question really is, why is it so important? And I'll tell you, surveying and predicting helps to kind of fill in a study guide in your brain, right? If you were studying for a biology test and your teacher said, "There's a test on Monday, good luck," you would probably feel a little bit lost. Like, what's the test on? What am I supposed to be studying? What do I need to pay attention to? But if your teacher said, "There's a test on Monday, here's a study guide, fill it in, pay attention to this material, good luck," then you would certainly feel better about that test because you would have an idea of what you need to really focus on. So surveying and previewing a text before you start reading it creates a study guide in your brain. You have an idea of what this chapter is about, how long it is, what are some of the important things I'm going to be learning, which pieces do I really need to focus on, what do I already know. Once you've kind of created that outline in your brain, then when you sit down to read the text, you will learn much more from it, you'll retain it better, and it will all make sense to you. So it only takes a minute or two to do this, and it really has a big payoff at the end. Making predictions is another step that also can really help you retain information. First, the idea is to use those questions that you posed while you were surveying. If you saw subtitles that said, the Battle of Bunker Hill, maybe you could ask yourself, like, when is the Battle of Bunker Hill? Or when was the Battle of Bunker Hill? And try to answer that question. Try to predict what you think the answer is. Then as you're reading, when you find the answer to those questions, you'll be more likely to remember them because you've made some kind of a prediction. You have connected with the content and engaged with it. So it will help you stay engaged and it will help you remember the information longer. Now, building your vocabulary is important in terms of comprehension because you can't understand or comprehend a text if you don't understand or comprehend the language that's being used. So your text talks about understanding word parts and using resources like the glossary or the dictionary. What we're going to focus on in today's presentation is context clues. There are 4 types of context clues: definition, synonym, antonym, and example. So the first type of context clue is a definition clue. And in this example, you can see that the definition of the unfamiliar word is right in the sentence. So you don't have to guess at what the word means. It's presented to you right there. So that is a context clue. It's a definition context clue, and it can really help you if you pay attention to that to make sure you understand what those unfamiliar words might mean. A synonym clue is when the word provides you with an unfamiliar word, but also a word that you probably know that means the same thing. So you can guess in this sentence that animosity means hatred. You may not have ever heard the word animosity before, but because of the way the sentence provides you with a synonym, you now are able to understand a little bit better what that means. In an antonym clue, the author does the exact opposite and provides you with an unfamiliar word and a word that means the exact opposite so that you can interpret that. So in this example, she was virtuous, unlike her mean and sneaky cousin. So unlike is a signal word that this is an antonym clue. So we can guess that virtuous means the opposite of mean and sneaky. And then finally, an example clue doesn't so much tell us what the word means or what other similar words might mean. An example clue instead gives us our unfamiliar word, but then it gives us a series of examples so that we can guess at what the word means. So you might not know the word geologist, but because the sentence is giving you examples of things that a geologist studies, you can probably make an informed guess about what that unfamiliar vocabulary word might mean. So context clues are important ways in order to learn new vocabulary. This is the skill that you should put into practice when you go back and watch the Jabberwocky video or read that poem. You should be able to use some context clues in order to understand the storyline, even if you don't understand all of the vocabulary. There's also a set of Quizlet practice flashcards in the D2L course that help you kind of practice these 4 different types of context clues. You'll be able to read the sentence and try to determine which kind of a clue it is. So there's a good practice exercise in Quizlet that can help you with this skill. I hope that this helps, and if you have any questions, certainly let me know. I'll be happy to discuss any of it with you or go over anything that's unclear.